What happens when an entire army simply disappears? Not defeated, not scattered, but gone, without a trace. At the height of its power, Rome commanded the greatest military force the world had ever seen. Its legions marched across continents, built roads through wilderness, and crushed anyone who stood in their way. But in the far reaches of the empire, beyond the comfort of stone cities and guarded borders, there were places Rome could not fully control. Cold lands, endless forests, and enemies who knew the terrain far better than any outsider ever could. Somewhere in those distant frontiers, one Roman legion marched forward, disciplined, armed, and confident. They were never seen again. No final battle recorded, no bodies recovered, no clear explanation left behind. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed them whole. For centuries, historians have searched for answers, and yet the mystery remains. To understand how a Roman legion could vanish, you first have to understand Rome itself. At its height, the empire of ancient Rome stretched across vast lands, reaching from the deserts of the Middle East to the misty hills of Britain. Roads connected distant provinces. Cities rose where there had once been wilderness, and wherever Rome went, its legions followed. A Roman legion was more than just a group of soldiers. It was a machine. 5,000 to 6,000 men trained to move as one, disciplined, organized, relentless. They could build forts overnight, lay down roads through forests and mountains, and when it came to battle, they were nearly unstoppable. Each soldier carried heavy armor, a shield, and weapons designed for close combat. But their true strength wasn't just in their equipment, it was in their unity. Every movement was practiced, every formation precise. For generations, these legions had crushed rebellions, expanded borders, and secured Rome's power. To face a Roman legion was often to face defeat. And yet, even a force like this had its limits. Because Rome's power depended on control, on roads, on supply lines, on communication. And far from the heart of the empire, those things began to fade. Beyond the safety of its cities and walls, Rome was no longer invincible. At the very edge of Rome's vast empire lay a land that felt nothing like Rome. This was Britannia, a place of cold winds, endless hills, and forests so thick they seemed to swallow the light. For Roman soldiers, it was a world apart from the stone roads and structured cities they knew. Here, the air was damp, the ground was uneven, and the horizon always hidden behind mist. The empire had claimed this land, but it never truly controlled it. Beyond the reach of fortified camps and watchtowers, local tribes moved freely. They knew every hill, every hidden path, every place where an army might slow down or disappear. To the Romans, these lands felt unpredictable, unstable, and quietly hostile. Still, orders were orders. Legions were sent north, not just to defend, but to push forward, to expand Rome's presence deeper into territory that resisted it at every turn. Among them was a seasoned legion, battle-tested, experienced, confident. They had marched through other lands before, faced rebellions, survived harsh conditions. But Britannia was different. There were no clear battle lines here, no grand armies waiting in open fields. Instead, there was silence. Long stretches of silence, broken only by the wind through the trees, or the distant cry of something unseen. The further they moved from the safety of their forts, the more isolated they became. Supply lines stretched thin, communication slowed, and the familiar order of Roman life began to fade. Out here, discipline alone wasn't enough, because this was not a place you could simply conquer. This was a place that watched you, studied you, and waited. And so, they kept moving. Deeper into Britannia, into land that grew quieter with every mile. The trees closed in tighter, the light grew dimmer, and the path ahead became less certain. Still, the Legion marched the way it always had, in formation, in rhythm. Boots striking the damp earth in unison, shields brushing against one another, the steady clink of metal echoing through the forest. At the front, the centurion led without hesitation. He had done this before, crossed unfamiliar lands, faced unseen threats. But something here felt different. There were no signs of life, no distant fires, no movement between the trees. Only the sound of their own presence carried through the mist. At times the men thought they heard something else, a branch snapping in the distance, or a shape shifting just beyond sight. But whenever they turned, there was nothing there. The deeper they went, the more the world behind them seemed to disappear. The roads of Rome were gone. The order they relied on began to fade. Out here, the forest did not welcome them. It watched. Still, the orders remained clear. Move forward. So they did. Step by step, mile by mile, the Legion pressed on into the unknown. Until, at some point, they crossed a line no map had ever marked. A place where visibility shrank to only a few feet ahead, where the air felt heavier, and where even the most disciplined soldiers began to slow. The centurion raised his hand. The line halted. For a moment, there was only silence. No wind. No movement. Just the feeling that they were no longer alone. And then, nothing. No message was ever sent. No report ever returned. That march would be their last. And after that moment, they were never seen again. No messenger ever returned from that forest. No survivor stumbled back to tell the story. For a force as large and disciplined as a Roman legion, that kind of silence was almost impossible. At first, it didn't seem real. Commanders waited for word. Days passed, then weeks. But nothing came. Eventually, concern turned into something deeper, something harder to explain. Because when others were sent to search, they found almost nothing. No clear signs of battle, no large burial sites, no weapons scattered across a battlefield. Just fragments. A broken shield, half buried in the earth. A piece of armor left behind as if dropped in a hurry. Faint traces of footprints leading nowhere. It was as if the Legion had simply dissolved into the landscape. For the empire of ancient Rome, this made no sense. Roman legions did not just disappear. They fought. They fell. They left evidence behind. But here, there was almost nothing to explain what had happened. No final stand. No recorded defeat. Just absence. And over time, even the records grew quiet. Mentions of the Legion faded. References stopped. As if somehow the loss itself had been erased. What remained was not a story of defeat, but a gap in history. A silence that stretched across centuries. And a question that refused to go away. How does an entire army vanish without leaving a trace? So, if no battlefield was ever found, what could have happened to them? That question has lingered for centuries, and over time, a number of theories have emerged. Some are simple. Others far more unsettling. The first is the most direct. An ambush. In the thick, shadowed forests of Britannia, local tribes didn't fight like Roman armies. They avoided open confrontation. Instead, they watched, waited, and struck when the moment was right. A Roman legion, marching in long columns through narrow paths, could easily have been stretched thin, vulnerable, surrounded without warning. If the attack came from all sides, fast and coordinated, the Legion might never have had time to form proper defenses. No formation, no command structure, just chaos. And in that chaos, total destruction. But even that raises a problem. Where are the remains? Where are the signs of such a massive clash? That leads to a second theory. Not a single battle, but a slow collapse. Days of marching through hostile terrain, cold, wet conditions, supplies running low. Small attacks, constant pressure, no real chance to rest. Over time, even the most disciplined force can begin to break. Men fall behind, units lose contact, order weakens. Until what was once a legion becomes scattered groups trying to survive. And eventually, nothing at all. There is also a more distant possibility. That the Legion never vanished in Britannia. Some believe it was reassigned, quietly moved away from the northern frontier and sent to another region of the empire. Perhaps to the east, to a conflict we only partially understand. And there, far from where history expected them to be, they were destroyed. Their fate recorded elsewhere, or lost entirely. And then there is the final theory, the one that is hardest to prove and hardest to ignore. that ancient Rome knew exactly what had happened and chose silence. A defeat so complete, so humiliating, that it threatened the image of Roman power itself. So instead of preserving it, they erased it. Records faded, mentions disappeared, and over time, the legion itself became a ghost. Each of these theories offers an explanation. Each one fills part of the silence, but none of them can fully account for what was lost. Because in the end, we are left with something far more unsettling than a clear answer. We are left with absence, and the unsettling possibility that whatever happened out there was never meant to be known. And perhaps that is why the story never faded. Because without a clear answer, the mind keeps searching, filling the silence with possibilities. Over time, the Lost Legion became more than history. It became a legend. A story told and retold, changing slightly with each generation. In books, it marched through endless fog. In stories, it fought battles no one recorded. In imagination, it never truly disappeared. The idea of a Roman legion, disciplined, powerful, unstoppable, simply vanishing, stayed with people. It challenged something we believed to be certain. That strength guarantees survival. That order prevents chaos. That power can control the unknown. But this story suggests otherwise. Even the might of ancient Rome had its limits. And sometimes, history doesn't leave us answers. It leaves us questions. Questions that linger, not because they can be solved, but because they remind us of how much we don't understand. And so, the Legion lives on, not in records or ruins, but in memory. A symbol of something lost, and a mystery that refuses to be forgotten. And so, the legend endures. Not as a finished story, but as a question that still lingers. Somewhere beneath the quiet hills of Scotland, the truth may still be there. Hidden, buried, waiting. Or perhaps it's already gone. No final message, no clear ending, just silence. And maybe that's what keeps this mystery alive. Not what we know, but what we never will. Because somewhere between history and legend, there is a space we can't reach. And in that space, the Lost Legion remains.